Okay. And so, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good whatever it happens to be where you are. I have now finished. Look at all those nice people. So, good morning, Ronnie. Good morning, Holger. Good morning, Maria Jose. Good morning, David and Jeremy. Hi, Holger. Yeah, we're doing okay. Holger just asked if our family was okay. Under the circumstances, we're all doing quite well. We have not burned up. We have not caught COVID and died. We have not been shot by right-wing militias. It's pretty normal around here, actually. We just order groceries and call in pizzas and work, and that's what we're doing. And we've been doing it for a while now, and we're pretty good at it. And as I always tell people, it's pretty much what I was doing before the pandemic, so it doesn't change a whole lot of stuff in terms of our day-to-day behavior around here. But yeah, the wildfires of a week and a half, 2 weeks ago were much closer to us. And although most of California woke up a couple of days ago to find the skies an absurd orange-red color, really looked like Mordor, as everybody kept saying. It was that was actually less problematic for us. I mean, we still had to keep the windows closed, and we've got one of our kids has asthma, another one has a pulmonary issue, and so But that was just the smoke, and that was all over California. In fact, it was, in a sense, it's probably all over most of the world now because it just flew right up 50,000 feet in the air and started spreading. Sorry about that. It's as you may know, California is kind of the canary in the coal mine as far as things like climate change and how they affect places, and that is very clear that we are having far more wildfires than we used to. And pretty much everybody agrees that one of the main causes is climate change. So that's what's been going on with that. But the fires themselves are not close to us at the moment. There are other fires. There's fires all the hell all over California and much of the West. But they were closer to us a week and a half ago. That was the one where we had friends actually evacuating and things like that. Fortunately, pretty much all of them, I think, must be back or are back by now, and I've talked to a few of them. So that's as far as how things are going with the fire, with the pandemic. So still the same thing. Like everybody else, we're getting kind of housebound and cabin fevery. We're actually going through a big family worry at the moment because my parents this is the month for their 60th anniversary, and they'd like to do some kind of socially distanced something, and our offspring, who has the pulmonary issues, does not want to, and in fact not only doesn't want to go, doesn't want us to go, and I think there's an argument to be made there. So we're dealing with this stuff just like everybody else. All the kids their schooling is all online at the moment since they're all college age. So that's one advantage, or at least one not so bad thing. We don't have to worry about them being kind of dragged back out to sit in a classroom full of people who might or might not have the carriers for coronavirus. Other than that, just the working. I think we just sent out a newsletter the other day. So those of you who are on the mailing list, you know kind of what's going on with the books at the moment. Those of you who aren't on the mailing list, what the heck is wrong with you? We don't sell things. We don't peddle things. We certainly don't give your information to anybody else. But just at the moment, I'm trying to remember how the best way is to contact my wife, Deborah Beal, and get her your email address so that we can send you a newsletter. As I hasten to say, we're not selling anything. It's just for people who are interested in the writing that I'm doing and stuff like that. And we certainly do not give it away. I mean, I don't think we know how to. We're in that way, if no other, we are very boomer-esque. Converting converting things into money by the use of the internet has been rather rather hit or miss proposition for us. You may remember back in 2001, I tried to do Shadow March as an online project, and although the positive side of Shadow March was that we made friends that we still, are still among our very closest friends and people and readers and stuff. And there's been kind of a straight line of continuity between the Shadow March message board and the tagwilliams.com message board, and a lot of wonderful people that we met through that and consider friends. So that was the good side. The bad side was, of course, we made no money. We lost money because it was in the early days of trying to make things sell on the internet. And we're not necessarily people who are super good at selling things anyway. So we lost money. That's why actually I wrote both the first Shadow March online and War of the Flowers at the same time. And that's the only time I've ever written two novels at the same time. And that was specifically because despite my boundless optimism about most things, I had an inkling that we probably would not make any money trying to do serial fiction on the internet. Although we were grateful for everybody who did subscribe, so don't get me wrong. But because I kind of sensed that was going to happen, or had a strong possibility of happening, I actually wrote another book at the same time, which was hell. But it did mean that we didn't have to go live at the dump. We didn't have to go live at the municipal dump or anything like that. So we were able to continue living with an actual roof and, plumbing and all that good stuff. So it was, as always, it's a mixed blessing. But the one thing about us, whatever else we may do, in whatever areas, and there are many in which I may be kind of... I'm not the world's most serious business guy. Thank God Deborah has good business sense, because I'm I don't want to be interested in any of it. If it's presented to me as a philosophical problem or an issue to rationalize, then I'm fine. But the day-to-day stuff of it, just I don't know. I've got some weird thing about it. So anyway, I don't know how I got off onto that, except I was trying to say, so we don't monetize the mailing list in any way, shape, or form. It is strictly for us to send things which at least always have some kind of little letter from me, that is not something that I posted anywhere else. It's just, it's just between me and the folks on the mailing list. And we don't do anything else with it. We don't hand it to anybody else. We don't share it. We certainly don't peddle it to people who want to. I don't know how we'd explain our brand anyway. I mean, what is the commonality between the people who read my books? I could not tell you in a million years. I've been going to conventions and traveling on book tours all over the world for years. And the only thing I can tell you about my audience is that I pretty much liked all of them, from talking to them or meeting them or hanging out with them or having a beer with them after a signing or something like that. That's the only common thing. And I think it's more just because they're the kind of people who like the kind of things I write. And so we obviously have something in common to begin with. But in terms of any other characteristics, I mean, I've always been very pleased that I seem to have as many female readers as male, which is one of the things that I've always thought, okay, so you're probably doing something right. Certainly, although obviously, like a lot of things, it's hard to tell, from just subjective anecdotal information, but I see people of all kinds and colors and ages. I've met in the process of signing books and stuff, all over many, many countries on several continents. So, yeah, I mean, that's always been a really cool thing. And one of the nicest things about being a writer is getting to meet the people who actually read your stuff. One last thought before I get to reading, which is Deborah, my wife, once said, you are so lucky, Tad. I said, yeah, I agree, but why? And she said, "Oh, well, I was just thinking about, what you do for a living, and especially when you interact with people. And the thing with you is that you pretty much see everybody at their best, because, you're the opposite of a policeman who's usually seeing people on their worst day, and instead you're seeing people, and she's absolutely right, people who have chosen to read my books and like them enough to bother to come to an event that I'm doing or show up at a convention and introduce themselves. And, there's that idea that because they like my work, they're willing to try to like me before deciding I'm actually pretty creepy or whatever. I have no control over that. So she's absolutely right. She's absolutely right. And that is probably the nicest thing about what I do, is getting to meet so many cool people. And it has a downside, of course, which is that I never have the time to spend as much time with, because as I said, most of the readers I meet, I'm like, yeah, cool person. I enjoy hanging out with them. And occasionally I get a little while to do it at a con or something. But most of the time I'm going like, yeah, I'm sure if we lived near each other and my life wasn't so weird and complicated, you'd be a friend. So it's grand, but it's also a bit frustrating sometimes. Oh, one last anecdote. I was having an argument on a political, on Facebook or something, or Twitter, I can't remember. I think it was Facebook. And the argument itself doesn't matter. It was the usual. Tad goes onto somebody's page and says, actually, I don't think that's true. And then they get pissed at me. But several people on the page were pissed at me. Not surprising, because it was politics. And one of the people, after I'd written the last thing I was going to write, I said basically like, we could do this all day. I don't know why I keep falling into this particular trap. So I kind of I basically checked out of the conversation. But before I did, somebody posted something. And they said, I wrote Tad Williams an email once, and he never answered me. And I knew he was an asshole. I think this guy was conservative, so he was basically saying, and I'm pretty liberal, as most people know. So I think he was basically saying, I should have known by his politics that this guy was a jerk. But that wasn't the thing. I don't care about that. I mean, whatever. If we can't get past politics, that's too bad. But it was this idea that it was like my worst fear, which is, I got to a certain point several years ago, more than several years ago now, but where I just could not answer all the emails and letters that were sent to me. And I could not afford to hire an assistant to do it for me. So I just kind of had to recognize that, although I had all through my early career, of course, I had answered every flippin' letter that I got. Of course, because I was thrilled to be getting mail from readers. And same thing when the electronic age came on and all of a sudden it was email. I did my best to answer every single email, even if only in a cursory way sometimes, but I did my best. But I just hit a point where I couldn't do it anymore. But ever since then, of course. Oh, and the last thing was when I got onto Facebook, and after about a year, I found out that there's a whole section of emails that they don't tell you about, but it's there. And they're all the people who aren't on your friends list who've tried to send you emails. I don't know if they even have it anymore. But so I went, oh my God, I've got like emails I didn't realize that I've been getting for a year or so. Oh, and I went and pulled it down, once I'd found out that it was there. I pulled this thing down and it was like 3,000 emails had accrued. And I went, oh my God. No, because it was already a year overdue, and I couldn't answer the emails that I already had, let alone 3,000 more or whatever were waiting for me. But ever since then, I've felt like, God, I've failed everybody. And, then I hear a guy saying like, yeah, I knew when he didn't write me an email, he was a jerk. And I went, God, I'll bet every one of the 3,000 people whose emails I didn't even know about were like sitting there cursing me. It's everything I ever feared. It's a codependent nightmare. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking tonight. But yeah, trust me, that it's a codependent nightmare. Anyway, okay, I'm going to read the book. I don't know if I can even bring people up to date on things at this point because we're really down to the ending. And I may even finish tonight. Well, no, there's like 4 chapters, so I may finish tomorrow. Well, later today. Anyway, but so Tailchaser has been in the mound, in Roof Shadow, and Pounce Quick, and Eat Bugs, trying to escape, and then they lose Eat Bugs, and meanwhile there's like the first walkers and the good cats, to be as simplistic and reductionist as possible. The good cats show up and are fighting with the bad cats, and I'm sure it sounds like holy hell. But anyway, so while this is going on, they lose Eat Bugs. Fritty sends his friends on ahead of him, but just feels like he has to go back for this poor Eat Bugs, the poor old crazy cat. So he does and finds Eat Bugs, and as Fritty is sitting there waiting for the bad guys to get them with Eat Bugs who won't leave, he starts singing the song that the first walkers taught him, and all of a sudden Eat Bugs begins to change. And at that point, well, I will say it. I will reread this bit and then continue on from there. The sheer force of it flung Fritty back. He struck his head against the crevice wall. As he rolled groggily back over, he saw that the great light had faded. Eat Bugs crouched before him, his body black, nearly invisible, his legs red as fire, red as sunset. The marks of madness and disarray were gone, the fur thick and fine. Eat Bug's eyes stared back at Tailchaser with a wisdom and love and pride such as he had never seen before. There was a sadness, too, that hovered as close as a second pelt. Fritty knew that he was in the presence of all that was great in his race. "Very foul, little brother," Eat Bug said to him. But Fritty knew now that it was Eat Bugs no longer. The true Ka had come back. The voice was the melody of night, of things that know the old delicate pattern that earth and her things know. Fritty dropped to his stomach, hiding his eyes behind his paws. He curled himself into a ball. "No, little brother," said the wonderful voice. "You must not do that. You have no need for shame before me. Quite the opposite. You have helped me find my way back after a long, dark journey, and in a time of great need. It is I who should bow to you and your efforts." So saying, Lord Firefoot, for it was he, took up Fritty's paw and touched it to his brow. The white star on Fritty's own forehead flared up in the gloom of the small cavern. "Ah, little one, I followed your special light, as Irau Sky Stone followed the dawn star into the trackless east," said Lord Tangalore. "I only hope I have come in time." The air in the small place shimmered again, and Lord Firefoot seemed to grow to fill every crevice in the chamber. "I must needs settle some old accounts," he said. "I have wandered many years, trapped in the prison of my own madness, while my brother nursed his corruption. He has called up powers that the earth was not meant to hold, as I did myself once upon a time. My reasons were better, but still it left me a racked shell, and my Ka flown far away. Many perversions have been loosed by my brother Heart-Eater. I must try to put an end to his ways." The presence seemed to shrink slightly. "Ah, and my brother White Wind must be avenged too, or never again will his Ka rest. Alas, that innocents such as you should be caught up in the doings of the firstborn. Come now, young Tailchaser, what may I do for you? No naught I try will go far toward equaling my debt. Speak, for soon I must be gone." Stunned, Fritty sat for a moment in silence. When he spoke at last, he found himself unable to look up at the one before him. "I wish my friends to escape safely, all the brave folk who came here." The firstborn was silent, as if staring out over a great distance. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Little brother, Many of those brave ones are gone. Their cause have fled to the bosom of the All-Mother. Even I cannot quicken them, else I would have saved my own brother, who I loved. As for the Fela and the youngling, well, I shall try to help, but at this moment they need your presence more than mine. I cannot explain, but it is so. Freddie jumped up and scrambled toward the way out, but Firefoot called him back with a laugh. It can wait but a moment more, I promise you. I did see something else, another desire that courses strongly in you. You seek someone, although you have lost your search. This search helped lead you to me, so it seems only right that I should aid you. Freddie felt as if he were falling into the sky-deep eyes. A moment later, he was staring wildly from wall to wall. The tiny underground chamber was empty. Then a voice came to him, treading his mind as effortlessly as Heart-Eater had, but nimbly and with respect. I would have given you the knowledge to finish your quest. I have given you the knowledge to finish your quest. Would that I could give you more, but I shall have sore need of my resources very shortly. You will be in our thoughts, little brother. The presence was gone, and Freddie was completely alone. Wondering, he remembered the claw guard who had been massing outside. When he cautiously lifted his head through the fissure, he discovered the tunnel to be as empty as if it had been undisturbed since the days of Harar. Only several piles of dust, gently sifting in an unexpected cool breeze, spoiled the absolute stillness. Unable to remember how he had covered the distance, or what paths he had followed, Tailchaser found himself mounting the curving path that circumscribed the cavern of the scalding flume. The great boiling river roared as vigorously as ever and seemed to be striking even higher on the stone walls that penned it. The path before him was masked in mist. Freddie started upward. The river did, in fact, seem to be leaping to greater heights. The tendrils of water splashed up against the cavern's massive ceiling, then fell back as hissing rain. Despite the poor visibility, Tailchaser moved quickly and surely along the pitted, eroded trail. He had been touched by something far beyond himself, and still felt the buoyant after effects. The breeze changed direction, coming about into his whiskers, and in that instant he heard Pouncequick's shrill squeal of fright and pain. "Pouncequick! Roof Shadow, I'm coming!" Freddie howled. Suddenly he was leaping along the narrow path, trusting to instincts that he knew he did not possess, in his frenzied hurry to reach his friends. As he skidded around a bend in the narrow trail, scrabbling for footing above the booming, steaming waters, he saw his two companions ahead. Roof Shadow was standing over a bleeding Pouncequick, struggling fiercely with a great dark creature twice her size. Scratchnail. The black beast, striped and spotted with blood, turned his mad eyes toward Tailchaser's approach. A snarling grin curled his wide face. "Starface! Starface the Tailchaser! I'll kill him someday! I will!" Scratchnail gave out a loud bark of laughter, and Roof Shadow fell back, wounded and panting. Tailchaser bounded forward as Scratchnail fell into a crouch, thick tail thrashing the air behind him. A rumble from the ceiling stones seemed to pass through the cavern. Freddie pulled up short in the wide part of the path, dropping to a bow-backed hunch several jumps away from the claw guard. The ominous rumble mounted once more above the clamor of the flume. "Come for me if you want me, Scratchnail," Tailchaser said, putting as much scorn into his voice as he could muster. The claw beast grinned again, and his tail whipped. "Come for me, if you're through fighting kittens, you stone-headed Garin." Scratchnail growled and stood, the short fur on his back rising up like black grass. "Roof Shadow!" Tailchaser cried above the increasing tumult from above and below. "Take Pounce quick and keep moving!" "He's badly hurt, Tailchaser," the Thala called back. The claw guard was moving sinuously down the path toward Fritty, death in each scarlet claw. "All the more reason to get him to the surface," Fritty called. "This is my fight. You've done what you can. Go on." Fritty saw Roof Shadow and Pouncequick turn and move up the trail, the kittens stumbling badly. He turned his attention back to the creature before him. They faced each other then, the small orange cat with the white star, the dark, blood-nailed beast from the earth. Hips and tails wriggling, they stared for a long moment. The claw guard sprang, and there was another great noise from above. In the instant before contact, Fritty saw showers of small stones come pattering down, and Scratchnail was on him. Biting and kicking, they rolled over on the narrow causeway, the dark beast's low snarls matched in intensity by Tailchaser's own maddened yowling. They gouged and snapped, then broke apart, walking a constrained circle on their tiny ledge, death instincts drawing them slowly nearer each other until, leaping, they closed again. The ritual was repeated over and over. The superior size of Scratchnail was wearing away Fritty's failing strength, but the smaller cat would not let up. They struggled and bit, fell apart, then fell together once more. Both cats moved with the anguished slowness of dark, blind creatures on the bottom of the big water, blind things thrashing in the mud. Finally, Fritty was overborne, pushed down on the edge of the pathway. His head hung limply, a dizzying drop above the rolling waters. The cavern now reverberated to a ceaseless pounding from the very stones of the earth, as if giant shapes danced above their heads. Fritty lay motionless. An arching jet of burning hot water shot up past his face. Scratchnail buried his teeth in Tailchaser's nape, gripping tight on the spine. Fritty could feel the mighty jaws closing. And then the pressure stopped. The claw guard had released his hold. He was staring down at Fritty, squat paws on the smaller cat's chest. Something in Scratchnail's eyes changed, and they lost focus. "Starface?" he said questioningly. His look of hatred seemed to change, to shift into something like fear. It really is you, Starface?" He seemed to be recognizing Fritty for the first time, as if he had been fighting spirits, shadows, that had suddenly become real. Scratchnail's expression began a slow twisting back into hatred. "You have destroyed me, you little sun rat," he snarled. The claw guard swiveled his head from side to side in confusion, looking up into the farthest reaches of the cavern. "What has happened?" he screamed. "What has happened to my—" A hideous, grinding roar, and then a great wave of gray rock passed before Fritty's eyes, obliterating Scratchnail from his sight. Then this too was gone. Suddenly, Tailchaser was alone on the ledge. Painfully turning his head, he saw the last of the sliding rocks careening down the sloping stone wall below him, and with a great splash, disappear into the swollen, steaming river. Of Scratchnail there was not a trace. Fritty pulled himself upright and clambered laboriously over the broken remains of the avalanche, then went limping up the winding path. The cavern was shaking in earnest now. The water below leaped and danced in mighty spouts that climbed toward the cavern's roof. The heat was oppressive. Tailchaser had to exercise all his resolve not to lie down where he was and not move again. He reached a tunnel leading out. Behind him, the cavern of the flume was threatening to shake itself to pieces. He numbly put one foot in front of the other and trudged on until he could walk no farther, then fell prone to the tunnel floor. He could dimly see what seemed by happy fancy to be a patch of sky. The tunnel walls, too, were quivering. How funny, he thought distractedly. Everyone knows there's no sky below the ground. The last noise he heard was a rending crash from the cavern below. It sounded as if every tree in Ratleaf had fallen at the same time. Then the tunnel collapsed behind him. Chapter 30. Poor, intricated soul, riddling, perplexed, labyrinthical soul. John Donne. Spring was bursting and crawling, pushing forth irreverent scents and smells. The very ground beneath Tailchaser's back was warm with activity and renewed life. Soon he would get up and stroll back to his nest, to his box on the porch of the man dwelling. But for now he was content to sprawl on the grass. A breeze ruffled up his fur. He waved his legs carelessly in the air, enjoying the cooling effect. Eyes closed, a long day of squeaker dandling and trees scuffing behind him. He felt as though he could lie this way forever. The feathering wind brought a tiny squeak, faint as the gleeful cry of a vole finding vole treasure deep within the earth. Deep, deep within the earth. Again the cry came, louder now, and Fritty thought he heard his name. Why would anyone want to disturb him? He tried to recapture his pleasant reverie, but the imploring voice became more insistent. The breeze increased, singing past his whiskers and ears. Why should his perfect day be spoiled? It sounded like Hushpad or Roof Shadow. Felas were all alike, treating you like an old stoat until they needed you, then following you around and yowling as if they'd hurt themselves. Ever since he had brought Hushpad back from where had he found her? It hadn't been more than an eye since Tailchaser. That cry again. His brow furrowed, but he would not condescend to open his eyes. Well, maybe just to take one quick look. Why couldn't he see anything? Why was it all black? The voice cried out again, sounding as though it were disappearing down a long, dark tunnel, or as if he were falling away himself into the darkness. The light. Where was the light? Somebody or something was licking his face. A harsh, insistent tongue rasped across the sorest parts of his mask. But when he tried to pull his head away, that pain was worse. He lay back, resigned, and after a while, little spots of light began to appear before his eyes. He could make no sense of these swirling, leaping points, but his nose finally distinguished a scent that was familiar. The floating specks began to coalesce. Like tall grass pushed aside by a paw, the blackness slid away. Roof Shadow, with a look of fierce concentration, was washing his muzzle with her rough pink tongue. Fritty could not focus his eyes well. She was very close, and the effort was painful, but her smell confirmed it. He spoke her name and was surprised when she did not react. He tried again, and this time she drew back and stared, then called out to someone he could not yet see, "He's awake!" Fritty tried to greet her, to tell her how glad he was to see her in the fields of the living, if that was where he was, but before he could do more than make a sound, he slipped back into darkness again. When he awoke later, Roof Shadow had been joined by a large, shaggy red cat. It took him a long time to recognize Prince Fencewalker. What? What? His voice was very weak. He swallowed. What happened? Are we on top of the ground? Roof Shadow leaned forward, green eyes warm. Don't try to talk, she said soothingly. You're safe. Fencewalker brought you out. Fritty felt a weak, irrational stab of jealousy. Where's Pouncequick? He asked. You'll see him soon. She looked up at the prince. Fencewalker beamed down with bluff good spirits. Worried about you. Didn't think, just worried we were. What a row, what a row. Fabulous tussle. The prince seemed about to give Fritty a good-natured thump, but Roof Shadow moved between Fencewalker and his intended victim, who was already tiring. Just sleep, and let Mirslar mend, she said. Tailchaser reluctantly let go his grip on wakefulness. So many questions. Fritty found healing in the dream fields. He soon found that he could sit up, although it dizzied him. A determined self-inventory found no serious wounds. His numerous cuts had stopped bleeding, and Roof Shadow's patient ministrations had cleaned the worst of the matted blood from his short fur. His eyes were swollen. He had trouble opening them more than halfway, but generally he was in good condition. Roof Shadow did not want to answer his questions yet and would sit patiently silent as he pressed her for information. Fencewalker dropped by frequently to see Tailchaser as he recuperated, but his roving temperament made it difficult for him to sit and talk long. His visits were hearty, but brief. Fritty's dreams had not been entirely wrong. The ground was warm. The distant reaches of Ratleaf Forest were capped in snow, a white mantle extending into the misty horizon. But the fringe of the forest in which Tailchaser had awakened was green and wet, the thin carpet of grass humid and damp, as though the snow had been suddenly melted away by a hot sun. Roof Shadow said that all the area around the mound was that way, but that she thought the snow would return eventually. It was, after all, still the ragtag end of winter. Days went by, and before long Fritty was up and walking. He and Roof Shadow explored the prematurely green forest, padding together through the sodden false spring. Here and there a solitary fafaz could be heard singing bravely in the treetops. Fritty still had not seen Pouncequick, but Roof Shadow promised to take him soon. Pounce, too, was recovering, she said, and should not be excited. Here and there in the unseasonal greenery, the startled faces of other folk would appear, gaunt and staring-eyed. Most of those who had made their way to freedom during the dying hours of the mound had lingered only a short while, leaving to search for better hunting or to return to home grounds. No spirit of fellowship seemed to tie these survivors. They drifted off one by one as they became strong enough to travel. Only the sick and the dying remained with Fencewalker's band of hunters, and soon even the prince would lead most of his party back to the wooded bowers of First Home. A small guard would be mounted to stay and keep watch on the site. Seeing these survivors, Fritty wondered aloud about the fate of the uncounted multitudes, masters and slaves, who had not escaped. Hearing this, Roof Shadow told Fritty as best she could of the final hour in Vasna. When we left you with that beast, she said, I never expected to see you again. It seemed as if the world was coming to pieces. She walked silently for a while. Fritty tried to say something reassuring, but she stopped him with a curiously stern look. Pounce was half dead, bleeding. I pulled him up the last tunnel by the neck. Things were falling, crashing. It sounded like giant creatures fighting. Finally, we made it out of that place, out into the valley. It was covered with snow. There were others there too, milling and crying. We were like lost cars, stumbling, falling in the snow. The ground was shaking. Their walk had taken them out to the rim of Ratleaf. Before them stretched the rising plain, slick with melted snow, droplets gleaming on the leaves of stunted vegetation. Roof Shadow led on, continuing her story. I saw someone dashing about, making loud noises and leading folk to and fro. That was Fenswalker, of course. I caught up with him and I told him what had happened. I'm afraid I was rather ears back at that point, but the prince understood. He said, Tailchaser, young Tailchaser. Fenswalker's not so very old, but he acts as if he'd like to be. Anyway, he said, can't have that, not young Tailchaser. Must do something by all means. You know how he talks. Well, he gathered up a few of the healthier folk, and I led them all back to the tunnel. I stayed with Pouncequick, who was very weak and sick. They found you half buried under dirt and rocks and carried you out just before the rest of the place shook itself down. I didn't know you were alive for a very long time. I hadn't been able to bear waiting to find out. Fritty was stepping over a twisted root and missed the expression on the gray Phaler's face. Stopping for a moment to shake dry a sopping paw, he asked, What do you mean when you say the place shook itself apart? I'm afraid I don't remember the end very well. I'm going to show you, said Roof Shadow. They toiled a while longer up the sloping plain, wrapped in thought. At last they reached the edge of the valley in which the mound had stood. Where Vasnir had once pushed its brooding head up through the valley floor, there was now a wide, shallow basin, the ground sunken as if beneath the tread of a league-wide paw. The soil was as black as the wing of a krauka. On the way back to Ratleaf, Fritty asked again to see Pouncequick. He has been with me longer than anyone, Shadow, he pointed out. She seemed disturbed by his use of the shortened name. I never tried to prevent you, Tailchaser, she said unhappily. I just suggested what I thought best. He's gotten very strange, she added after a moment. Who could blame him after what he's been through, countered Fritty. Who could blame any of us? I know, Tailchaser. Poor Pouncequick. And eat bugs, too. Fritty looked at her, wondering, but Roof Shadow was shaking her head sadly. I haven't asked yet, but I suppose I know, she said. He was... Well, you were too late to help him, weren't you? Fritty balanced his secret and decided to keep it. By the time I found him, Eatbugs was gone. And that is mostly true, he thought. Such sad times, said Roof Shadow. I suppose I should take you to Pouncequick. Tomorrow, all right? Fritty bobbed approval. I didn't know him, she continued. Eatbugs, I mean. I understand I intend no disrespect, Tailchaser, but you have the oddest friends and acquaintances. Fritty laughed. I'll race you back, he said, and they ran like wildfire. The muted advent of spreading light brought Fenswalker and other guests in its train. Fritty, pulled taut in a walking stretch, spotted the prince swaggering through the underbrush, moisture gleaming on his shaggy form. At his side stalked the graceful black form of Quiverclaw. A cry of pleasure from Tailchaser was followed by warm greetings all around, and the three cats, two large, one small, sprawled contentedly and conversed.
I hear that Stretchlow's confidence in you was amply filled, Tailchaser.
Quiverclaw's grave words made Fritty want to wiggle with pleasure, but the demands of maturity won out over indulgence. I am honored that great hunters like the Prince and yourself think so, Thane. I must admit that most of the time I was in that place, I would have settled for a quick, painless death. I truly would have.
Ah, but you didn't, did you? Crowed Fencewalker. That's the nose-biter. And from what I hear, sent for help by Squirrel, smiled Quiverclaw. Unusual, but effective.
This time, Tailchaser's wriggle escaped suppression. I thank you both, he said. The main thing, though, is that you came. I saw it. It was wonderful. Fritty sobered. I also saw that thing that Hearteater called up. Horrible. It was horrible. Quiverclaw nodded.
Things like that were not meant to be. Already I have trouble remembering what it looked like. So long it was. The os given flesh. I suppose that soon I will be thankful I cannot recall its aspect. But it caused grave loss. Squeakerbane, Harar bless his mighty heart, fell before it. He and others beyond my reckoning.
Is Hangbelly dead? Asked Fritty quietly. Quiverclaw pondered silently for a moment, then lifted his head with a crooked grin.
Hangbelly? He was grievously injured, but he will live. The Thane chuckled. It will take more than even that terror to kill old Bounce Gut.
Fritty was pleased to hear of the fat first walker's survival. Fencewalker smiled, but looked uncharacteristically morose. Many, many brave folk fell, said the prince. The world will not see a gathering of the folk like that for many seasons. More seasons than the forest has tree trunks. Many good fellows never came up from the ground again. Pah! Fencewalker's pink nose twitched in sorrow and disgust. Snare Mouse and young Fur Scuff, Poke Snout, the Thanes, scrawny old Sourweed and Squeakerbane, Day Hunter and Night Catcher, my fine lads. They died protecting me, you know. They're all down in the cold earth, and we sit in the sun. Visibly upset, the prince turned away and curried his tail. Fritty and Quiverclaw stared at the ground between their paws. Tailchaser's nose felt hot and itchy. But what did Hearteater mean to do? Fritty finally blurted out. Why did it all happen? Meerslot, he breathed, the thought occurring to him for the first time. Lord Hearteater is gone, isn't he? Dead? He looked anxiously at the Thane. We think so, Quiverclaw said. We have talked about it, the prince and I. If nothing else, we must be able to tell the queen of the outcome. Yes, we think Hearteater is gone. Nothing could have survived that final hour. Fencewalker, who had straightened up, said, Oh, that was a real whisker bender. What happened? Asked Fritty. Well, said Quiverclaw, when the Ficos thing came up from the pit, we tried to fight. It was laying about fiercely, though. We were forced to retreat from the cavern. Retreat? Shouted Fencewalker. Ran! Tail over whiskers like spooked squeakers. And who could blame you? Some stayed to fight, my prince, like Squeakerbane. Chastened, Fencewalker waved a paw for the thing to continue. Anyway, we fell back into the outer chambers. There we met the prince and his folk, who had breached the minor gate. The Ficos forced its way out of the cavern, but did not seem to have purpose. It was destroying anything in its path, friend or foe. It seemed mindless. Following some urge, it shambled up one of the main corridors. That was all that saved us from complete rout, I think. Everything was chaos, folk fighting and dying. Fencewalker interrupted.
It began to get dark. Don't forget that. Quiverclaw nodded gravely. Indeed, it was as though that huge monstrous thing, or maybe Heart-Eater himself, was drawing in all the light, taking a deep breath of light. I can't explain. We were fighting in the deepest blackness, then something like skyfire, but underground, shot through the chamber, burning and crackling as it went by, straight through and into Heart-Eater's cavern as if it had a will. I have never seen the like.
Fritty felt a strong joy deep inside himself.
I wish I could have seen it. From where we made our stand, we could see the light bursting from Heart-Eater's chamber as if the sun had rolled down into a hole in the ground. The earth around us began to shake. There were great hissings and boomings like the sky was tumbling down or the forest was dancing above our heads. Fencewalker shouted out to run, to get all the folk out. That's true, the prince inserted, and everyone went racing for the tunnels leading out. Heart-Eater's creatures were running in circles like berry-drunk fa-fas, screeching and clawing at one another. It was a sight that will live before my dream eyes forever. It was all falling down then, said Fencewalker, falling down and scalding mist and waters coming up through the floors. What a tumble that was for the firstborn, eh? Who would have dared think of it?
Tailchaser reflected on all he had heard. So much to think about. Should he try to explain what had happened to him? Was he even sure what had happened? Why? He asked finally. What did Heart-Eater want?
We may never know, really, said Quiverclaw, furrowing his pitchy brow. Lord Heart-Eater, we can suppose, wanted revenge on the descendants of Harar. He has been long beneath the earth and had been brooding since time beyond tail tips on bringing the folk under his sway. He must have been wearying of his poor copies of Mirslar's children and their bobbing and scuttling. But he was of the firstborn, and I do not think his purposes or madnesses will be wholly knowable to us. He called on things outside the earth dance. It seems that a balance was disturbed. The dance is complicated, and disturbance on the one side creates counter-disturbance. The Thane laughed. I can see Fencewalker staring at me as if I had the foaming mouth sickness. He's right, Tailchaser. There's not much point in singing the song if you have to guess at the words.
Quiverclaw was interrupted again, this time by a high-pitched chattering from the treetops. Fencewalker and the Thane exchanged a glance. Teats on a Tom, groaned Fencewalker. I'd forgotten.
It sounds as if they're aware of that, said Quiverclaw as the angry noises resumed. Please, Lord Pop, he called, forgive us our discourtesy and come down. We have been careless of time.
Procession of Rick-Chick-Chick, Lord Pop in the lead, a disdainful expression on his round, toothy face, shinnied single file down the trunk of a poplar. Although Pop himself wore a look of insulted dignity, the rest of his train appeared goggle-eyed and nervous in the presence of the three cats. Lord Pop drew the crowd to a halt. His own nose, however, remained pointing conspicuously skyward until Fencewalker made an embarrassed coughing noise. Terribly sorry, Pop, really am. Didn't mean any offense against Rick-Chick-Chick. We just forgot, you see. Fritty wondered if the prince's discomfiture was due to his mistake or having to apologize to squirrels. The Rick-Chick-Chick chief eyed the uncomfortable prince for a moment.
Only came to tell so brave Tailchase cat, he said, a little huffily.
The squirrel lord then turned to Fritty.
Pledge kept, you see. Rick-Chick-Chick do right. Now, you must bring more Rick-Chick-Chick back. Badness most gone.
Pop performed a jerky head bob, and Freddy returned it. "Your folk are very brave, Lord Pop," he said. "Is that Master Plink?" "You did well, courageous Plink." The young Rick-Chick-Chick fluffed his tail. Buck fluffed his tail. The other Rick-Chick-Chick chittered admiringly. Lord Pop also clucked approval. "Squirrels," mumbled Prince Fenswalker. Pop fixed him with a bright eye.
"Tell Tailchaser what we have declared, Fenswalker," prompted Quiverclaw.
"Well," said the prince, embarrassed again. "Well, Dew Claws. You say it, Quiverclaw. It was your idea," he finished peevishly.
"Well," assented the Thane, "it has been declared by Prince Fenswalker, son of her beferred majesty, Queen Mir-Mirsor Sunback, that in recognition of their service, the Rick-Chick-Chick may live unhunted by the folk within the confines of Ratleaf, and that the first walkers will enforce this ban to the best of their powers."
Tiny whistles of approval came from Lord Pop's entourage.
"Of course, outside the bounds of Ratleaf, you had better look to your tail plumes," Quiverclaw added, in a not unfriendly way.
Lord Pop looked at Quiverclaw appraisingly and made a satisfied clicking sound.
"So,"
chirped the Squirrel Lord.
"now, all done.
He turned back to Freddy.
"Not gathering luck. So strange, cat."
Lord Pop faced around and led his rump-bobbling procession back into the branches. Within a moment, they were gone. "I'm sorry, but it just doesn't seem proper," grumped Fenswalker. "Squirrels." When smaller shadows arrived, Roof Shadow came to take Freddy to Pouncequick. She led him away from Prince Fenswalker's camp into a grove of cloud-tall trees. When he saw Pouncequick's pale, fluffy shape in a patch of sunlight at the center of the stand, Freddy pulled away from her and dashed forward. "Pounce!" he called. "Little Sunray!" Pouncequick looked up at the sound of his voice and rose with a grace belying his kittenhood. Tailchaser was on him in a moment, sniffing and headbutting, and Pouncequick's aloofness gave way briefly to pleased wriggling. "I'm so pleased to see you, finally," Tailchaser declared as he circled his friend, smelling the familiar Pouncequick scents. "I never dreamed that we could all be together once—" Freddy broke off, staring gape-jawed in shock. Pouncequick had no tail. Where his furry plume had once waved, there was now only a healing stump curled tightly against the youngling's haunches. "Oh, Pounce!" Freddy breathed. "Oh, Pounce, your poor tail! Hurrah!" Roof Shadow stepped forward. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you, Tailchaser. I wanted you to see that Pouncequick was alive and healthy first, or you would have been sick with worry when you yourself were in need of healing." Pouncequick pulled a quiet smile. "Please, don't be so upset, Tailchaser. We all lost things and gained things in that place. When you attacked Scratchnail in the Flume Cavern, you saved me from worse than this." Freddy did not feel comforted. "If only I'd arrived sooner," he groaned. Pouncequick met his eye with a knowing look. "You couldn't have," said the tailless catling. "You know that you could not have. We all played our part. A tail is a small thing to lose so that one can find a tail name." Pounce's face took on a distant expression, and Roof Shadow gave Freddy a worried look. "What do you mean, Pounce?" Freddy asked. "We freed the white cat," said Pouncequick dreamily. "I saw him. I saw him in his sorrow, and I saw him in his joy. When the mound fell, he is returned to the dark body of the All-Mother." The kitten shook his head as if to clear it. "We all lost something, but gained something far greater." He looked pointedly at Roof Shadow. "Even if we do not yet know it." Pretty stared at his small friend, who was making dream speech like a far censor. Pounceclick caught his look, and his small mask crinkled with warmth and affection. "Oh, Tailchaser," he giggled, "you look so comical. Come, let's go find something to eat." As they walked, Pounceclick spoke raptly of White Wind. "There is something, after all, in what Dewtreader said. A Phala will sacrifice herself for her kittens. You were willing to give yourself for us." "It wasn't that simple, Pounce," said Tailchaser uncomfortably. "Fear wants us to be whole, I think," the kitten continued. "But Dewtreader, well, Prince Dewtreader sees many things, but I think he is too gloomy. White Wind always loved to run, to feel the wind in his fur. He doesn't want his children to brood and grow mystical, only to remember that if they are not willing to give back the gift he has given them at any time, then the gift will do them no good." "I'm afraid that all your dreaming and thinking has put you far beyond my ideas, Pounce," said Tailchaser. Roof Shadow was grimacing. "But you yourself taught me the most, Tailchaser," said Pounceclick, amused. He stopped to turn over a fallen branch, sending a startled bug scurrying away. With a leap and a bound, the catling had imprisoned the scuttling insect. In another moment, he had crunched it up. "Anyway," Pounceclick spoke with a full mouth, "I've decided to go back to stay at First Home. There are many wise ones there, including the Prince Consort, and I have much to learn." Like cautious parents, Roof Shadow and Tailchaser paced silently behind the frisking Pounceclick. And that's the end of the chapter. So, yeah, we still have 1, 2, 3 chapters left. But the last one I think is quite short. So we can probably finish it all tomorrow evening. Tonight evening. Evening to the night. After morrow night to. Morrow nighting. Nighting. Mararber. Ah, crap. Okay. Now we can talk again. Anyway, okay, so we're done. I'm done. It's a little past 3 in the morning, so I don't want to keep any of you who are on my time zone up any later. And hello, everybody. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to read off your greetings and greet you back in return, but know that in here, no, wrong side, in here, in my tiny shriveled Grinch-like heart, you are recognized, acknowledged, and greeted. So with that, I will pass into the ether and then reform myself somewhere near a slice of pizza before going to bed. I wish you all the best. I urge you to be good to yourself and your family and friends and loved ones and neighbors and really pretty much just about everybody. Meanwhile, I will see those of you who can find the time to come see me again in whatever the hell that is. 9 hours till 12, 7 more hours, 16 hours from now, I will be reading probably the very last of Tailchaser's song. However, if I don't see you until next week, at which point we will be doing, I don't know what yet, I ask you to be nice to somebody. Couldn't hurt. And once again, thank you and send you love and best wishes from the Hacienda Beale Williams.